Soldiers of the landlocked West African country of Niger announced a coup on national television after reports emerged that they detained their elected president Mohamed Bazoum. Vergil Parba reports.
Niger, a former French colony, witnessed a military coup on Wednesday as soldiers in military uniforms declared they have taken power, and President Mohamed Bazoum was reportedly seized by members of Presidential Guard, leading to international condemnation and uncertainty in the region. In a video message, Colonel Major Amadou Abdramani, surrounded by soldiers, announced the end of the current regime, citing a deteriorating security situation and poor governance, and consequently national institutions were suspended and the country's land borders were temporarily closed.
Nous, forces de défense et de sécurité, réunis au sein du Conseil national pour la sauvegarde de la patrie, CNSP, avons décidé de mettre fin au régime que vous connaissez. Cela fait suite à la dégradation continue de la situation sécuritaire, la mauvaise gouvernance économique et sociale. Réaffirmons notre attachement au respect de tous les engagements souscrits par le Niger. Nous rassurons la communauté nationale et internationale par rapport au respect de l'intégrité physique et morale des autorités déchues conformément aux principes des droits humains.
The colonel also asked foreign powers not to interfere on the matter. Meanwhile, supporters of the Niger president took the streets to protest against the military takeover. The international community swiftly condemned the coup, with United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres strongly denouncing the move and said that the international body stands by the government and the people of Niger.
The Secretary General is following closely the situation in Niger. He condemns in the strongest terms any efforts to seize power by force and to undermine democratic governance, peace and stability in Niger. The Secretary General calls on all actors involved to exercise restraint and ensure the protection of constitutional order. The United Nations stands by the government and people of Niger.
While the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, condemned the attempted coup and demanded the release of the democratically elected president. The coup in Niger adds to regional instability, given the neighboring countries Mali and Burkina Faso have also experienced recent coups amidst jihadist uprisings. International leaders are closely monitoring developments and are calling for a return to constitutional rule in Niger. It can be noted that the now deposed President Bazoum is perceived as pro-West, or a key Western ally in the war against Islamist militancy in West Africa. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken called for the immediate release of President Mohamed Bazoum. As of now, the situation remains unclear and President Bazoum's whereabouts are unknown, with the presidential complex sealed off by the Presidential Guard. This has been Vergil Parba, SMNI News.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky asked his parliament to extend the martial law that will effectively cancel Ukraine's election scheduled for October. Andrea Santos has the details.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on July 26th submitted a proposal to the parliament to extend his country's martial law as well as general mobilization for another 90 days. The Ukrainian president first declared martial law on February 24, 2022, and has been extending it since then. Under martial law, all Ukrainian men ages 18 to 60, with some exceptions, are not allowed to leave Ukraine as they may be drafted to the military. It can be remembered that the Ukrainian parliament previously extended martial law and mobilization from May until August 18 of this year. Under Ukrainian law, parliamentary elections must be held no later than October 29th. It also requires a 60-day campaign period beginning August 28. Approval of Zelensky's request would mean that the martial law will be extended through November 15, and the Ukrainian constitution prohibits any elections during it. Zelensky also mentioned this in May, saying, quote, "If we have a martial law, we cannot have elections. The Constitution prohibits any elections during martial law." End of quote. In June, Zelensky in a BBC interview said that elections happen in a time of peace, when there is no fighting. While many allies support Zelensky, some of them have been critical of the possible cancellation of polls. Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe Chief Tini Cox, in an interview, said that Ukraine should prepare for a vote as soon as possible because democracy cannot properly function without the elections. Meanwhile, Zelensky said that Ukrainian forces have received reinforcements for its air defense capabilities, although he did not specifically mention where it will be deployed. The Ukrainian president said it will be directed to where they are most needed. Zelensky did not also disclose the type of air defense support given to Ukraine. It can be remembered that on July 23rd, the Ukrainian president said that Western allies are preparing for new military aid packages, including air defense equipment, and the aid was to be discussed at a meeting between NATO and Ukraine on July 26th. Reporting, this is Andrea Santos, SMNI News.
The first meeting of the Russia-Africa Summit has kicked off in St. Petersburg. During the event, Russian President Vladimir Putin promised that he will ramp up energy exports to Africa and promised to provide free grain. Carlo de la Peña reports.
Russia will be ready to ship free grain to some of the poorest nations in Africa within the next 3 months. This is the promise announced by President Vladimir Putin during a speech at the recently held Russia-Africa Summit in St. Petersburg. According to Putin, Burkina Faso, Zimbabwe, Mali, Somalia, the Central African Republic, and Eritrea will each receive 25,000 to 50,000 tons of grain, and Russia will cover the delivery costs of the shipments. It can be remembered that Russia broke off from the Black Sea grain deal after refusing to extend it for another 60 days. Russia had long insisted that the agreement had failed to achieve its aims. Putin also said that the United Nations is unable to persuade Western countries to lift economic sanctions on Russian food and fertilizer exports, which was also part of the deal. According to the Russian president, and quote, "They created obstacles even to our plans to donate fertilizers to the poorest nations that needed them. Out of 262,000 tons of the fertilizers blocked in European ports, we've managed to ship only 2 lots, merely 20,000 tons to Malawi and 34,000 tons to Kenya. The rest remains in the hands of the Europeans." End of quote. Putin also slammed Western leaders, calling them hypocritical for accusing Russia of causing instability in the global food market. As for energy exports, Putin touted that Russian companies have been boosting energy deliveries to Africa. In the past 2 years, Russia has ramped up its exports of oil, petroleum products, and liquefied natural gas to African countries by a factor of 2.6, as said by Putin. Supplies of Russian oil products also soared threefold in the first 5 months of 2023 to 8 million tons. Moscow is also developing logistics and financial infrastructure for energy deliveries. The 2-day summit takes place on July 27th to 28th and is currently being attended by guest delegations from more than 40 nations. The Kremlin said foreign dignitaries have gathered in St. Petersburg in defiance of Western pressure, with spokesman Dmitry Peskov saying that Western powers, including the United States and France, have tried to bully other countries into skipping the said event. The White House has previously denied meddling in the foreign policy of African nations. Reporting, this has been Carlo de la Peña, SMNI News.